morning. Thank you all for coming out and being a part of this. Officer Professional Development is something that is never really, it's a journey, right? Not a destination. So it never stops. And so again, thank you for being here. I definitely don't have all the answers, but hopefully you will take away some things here that will be helpful and beneficial to you throughout your career and you find useful. So before we actually dig into that, I'm Major Stephen Cash. I'm the comptroller here for the 50th Space Wing. A little bit about me. I've been here for about 4 months or so, I guess. I took command back in June. Before that, I was down at AFPC. I worked on the comptroller officer assignment team. And so that's where I learned a ton, just a bunch about personnel, not having that background, going there for 2 years, seeing the development teams, how the functional career fields operate, and how we standardize things across AFPC from a personnel perspective. So that's kind of why I'm passionate about this stuff and why I enjoy talking about it. We're also very, very, very fortunate to have the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Joe Solano here with us as well. I work with Joe down at AFPC. So Space Guys, 13Ss, yeah, so a lot of you guys, right? This is the man right here. You need to talk to this man. He's over at NSDC DO position. So he's going to sit in and for questions that you have that are functional specific to 13Ss, you got the expert right here. All right, so he worked on the assignment team for those guys down at AFPC as well. So this is interactive. Ask your questions. We don't have to wait to the end if you got a question about something or have an anecdote or want to discuss something in further detail. Please don't hesitate to do that. That's what we're here for. So again, after this, we're not going to be experts per se, but make sure you get one of those handouts, and it looks like everybody has. For the younger folks, some of that stuff won't be as relevant to you right now, but I promise you, it will be very quickly. You'll be surprised how fast you roll up on your majors board. You'll look back and just say, hey, where'd the time go? But you can use that as a guide to kind of understand some of the processes, and we'll talk with some degree of specificity on a lot of those topics that you see there. So I don't have a clicker, so I'll be my clicker. So I'll just kind of stand out over here and move the slides. But here's what we're going to talk about. We'll talk about what we think development is. Officer Professional Development, what I think it is, what you think it is, what it isn't. We'll have a conversation about technical depth versus breadth of experience in your Air Force career. We'll talk about some opportunities that the Air Force has that are great opportunities to get outside of your functional area of expertise to experience some different things. We'll get into some granularity in terms of the Air Force assignment system. If you, for the lieutenants and stuff, this is your first duty station. So when it comes time for you to move, we'll talk about how you get on what we call the vulnerable to move list and how that process works and how your functional assignment team racks and stacks all of the requirements and how you end up PCSing to your next job. We'll talk about the ADP. How many folks know what an ADP is? Okay. So how many folks don't know what an ADP is? And you can be honest. Okay, so just one brave soul, huh? All right. So we'll talk about the ADP. We'll talk about kind of some do's and don'ts on that. That's basically your direct link to your assignment team, and then we'll get into those formal developmental processes. We'll talk about the development team. We'll talk about what they do, what their responsibilities are. We'll talk about professional military education and how some of the squadron commander and DO boards kind of operate and how that process works. And we'll talk about officer vectors that the DT is responsible for. Okay, so this is the interactive portion. What do you guys think officer professional development? When you hear those three words, what do you think about? Anybody?
Set yourself up for whatever goal you have, knowing what vector that will take you in that direction.
Okay. Anybody else?
Just growing better officers. Just whether it's the Air Force trying to vector you to one direction or whether it's you trying to take yourself in that direction.
Yeah. Okay. So both great answers, and you hit on some things that are up there. You're talking about goals, knowing what your goals are. I think it's just a bumper sticker down there. I think it's a collective responsibility to grow Air Force leaders. As simple as that. And certainly there are, the member themselves has that individual responsibility to do the things that they need to do to posture themselves for career advancement. But it's not just about you as the individual. Certainly you need to know the timelines, know the processes, know when you're going to meet a majors board, know when your IBE and SDE looks are for professional military education. But it's not just that. It's about mentorship as well. And so a lot of times we think of mentorship as, you know, somebody up the chain or somebody a higher rank that I can go and have conversations with, and they can tell me what jobs I need to be doing or what I need to be doing to get to where they are. And certainly that's a part of it, but that's not the entire part of it. So when I think about mentorship, I think about 360-degree mentorship. So peer-to-peer mentorship. You know, I still talk to the folks that I went to tech school with. I still talk to the folks that I went to Squadron officer school with. Those relationships that you build during those specific dates and time will serve you and benefit you in the future. Just if nothing further than to bounce ideas off of, to see how things are, how people are doing things at other bases, things like that. Relationships matter a whole lot in our Air Force, right? And you'll find that that's, you know, more and more the case the longer you stay in. It's about relationships. So if you can learn that lesson early and carry that forth with you, you'll be better off, I promise you. I also think about mentorship as folks that are junior to you. So we talked about peers, we talked about, you know, folks that are higher ranking, but what about the folks that are junior to you? You know, you may not see that a lot right now for the young lieutenants, but you'll be surprised the longer you stay in, folks will be asking you your opinion on things. Hey, how did you get that job? Hey, how did you deal with this scenario? What did you do? What did you learn from it? Folks will start asking you those questions, and very quickly you will find yourself as a mentor. Whether you want to be or not, you will be. Because of the fact that people will respect and trust your opinion, and so they'll seek it out. And so something to keep in mind, it's not just you know, looking up. It's looking up, looking sideways, and looking down as well. Records are huge, right? You don't meet promotion boards, your records do. And so making sure your surf is squared away, making sure your duty titles are correct, making sure you know, dates are right, making sure all of your decorations and stuff get into the record. You'll be surprised how many folks don't pay enough attention to that, and it bites them. It bites them on promotion boards. It bites them on any kind of selection that AFPC is doing to look at any kind of special program. So make sure those things are squared away, tight, error-proof. All right, can't stress that enough. Okay. So that's kind of what development is. You know, we talked about the argument of breadth versus depth, and I think career fields have, you know, varying opinions on how much breadth they want an officer to get, and we'll talk to some of that. But I just want to make you aware of some of the various programs that are out there for you as an officer to pursue. So I'll start in the top left quadrant: Naval Postgraduate School, Air Force Institute of Technology, and civilian institutions. How many folks know that the Air Force will pay for you to get a master's degree or a doctorate, right? So those programs are out there. And so if you meet the time on station requirements, if you are in the specific gates or the windows, I would encourage you to apply for those. Now we know that master's degrees aren't technically required until you're meeting your 06 board. However, we also know that life happens, right? And so when I talk to people, I would always encourage you to knock that stuff out sooner rather than later. Why? Because job gets more difficult, more demands on your time. Oh, by the way, you start, you know, you get a family, you start having kids. That's certainly a demand on your time. And so I would offer that the faster you knock this stuff out while you're more junior, the better off you'll be, because it's just something that's not on your plate. The other thing that I would say is, you know, now a master's degree aren't required until 06 board. It didn't always be like that, right? And so policy could change. And so you don't want to be behind the power curve on that. You want to stay ahead of the game. So those are just some of the things that are out there for you. There's something called an Aav Speed guide, Advanced Academic Degree Special Experience Exchange Duty Guide. That's an annual guide that AFPC publishes. And we'll look through some of the timelines here in another slide. But look at that, because that has all of the exchange programs, all of the various career broadening programs. Education with Industry is one that I'm a big fan of. I participated in that program. That's where everybody know what that is. Heard of it before? See some head nods, some people don't. Okay, good. That is where the Air Force will allow you to partner with a Fortune 500 company and go wear civilian clothes for 10 months and be embedded in that company to learn industry best practices and bring that information back to the Air Force. All right, so it's a 10-month program. I know in FM we usually got 2 slots a year. And so talk to your assignment team. The application process is fairly simple, but as long as you get career field release and senior rater nomination, you can apply for those programs, and that is something that I learned a ton from. I'll tell you, spending 10 months with Microsoft up in Redmond, Washington, was something that I truly value. It's a unique experience, and it's something that I would encourage you to take a look at. Okay, any questions on any of those programs? Look at that guide. And if you, later on, if you can't find it or whatever, if you go to MyPERS and type in Aav Speed, it'll pop up. And so I think they've already got the 2018 guide out there, and I think that the process has already played out now. So the next time you would have an opportunity to be for 2019, and that guide will come out in 2018. If that makes sense. Any questions?
I have a specific question for mine. Should I ask that at the end? For like my situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm a 6'2".
Okay.
I want to go to weapons school, but weapons school requires you to change the 13 Sierra. Can I use speed to go to weapons school, become a 13 Sierra, and then go back to 6'2"?
Ooh, cross flows. Yeah.
No.
So I know you guys cross flow out, right? But not necessarily in, or the missile.
The missile guys
Yeah,
did that. Yeah. So, simple answer is no.
Okay.
But you can go to weapons school as a 6X. They'll just require a commitment. I want to say it's like 3 year, like an assignment tour afterwards as a 13S, and then you go back to your community. So
I can switch back to 6'2".
you'll never change.
Yeah,
You'll
okay,
probably
that's
acquire
what
like
I
a
thought. I thought
13S
we were just
secondary,
at 13 Sierra
but you're going to
forever.
be a
No,
6X
yeah.
going to weapons school.
Yeah, and so that's a good question. So I, as a 6'5", I was part of the 6X branch, so I worked with 6'1", 2s, 3s, 4s, and 5s, obviously. So you guys, 6'2s and 6'3s particularly, have a lot of exchange opportunities. So you'll get a lot of breadth, whether it be institutional requirements, which we'll talk about, whether it be at the various exchange programs. You'll get the opportunity. Your career field is pretty large by comparison to ours, but those opportunities are out there. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. All right, so here's kind of the timeline for the Aav Speed stuff. So you see the guide comes out, and these are notional timelines, right? Sometimes they come out late, sometimes early. It depends on kind of what's going on. But the guide will come out, and then your various career fields should be communicating the opportunities that are out there via DCO, DCS, whatever they're calling it these days, webinar. And then the application document that I talked about is called a quota tracking form. It's just a simple one-page document that talks about, hey, here are my top 3 choices with regard to Aav Speed. Here's why I want to do it, and here's my narrative section from my senior rater. They have to endorse that and actually formally nominate you. So that goes back to AFPC. There are boards that happen, that rack and stack officers. All that gets consolidated, and the announcements gets published. Yes.
So is the RAS-FAIL program, is that part of the speed, or is that totally separate?
I'm sorry, the what?
The RAS?
Oh, regional affairs.
Strategy?
Yeah. So those are, we'll talk about those when we get to institutional requirements. It's not necessarily a part of this process, but it is woven into the AFPC battle rhythm in terms of how they allocate those positions. Yeah, but it's not Aav Speed specific. Any other questions? All right, here we go. Institutional requirements. You see it there, RAS PAS. So these are Air Force enterprise requirements that don't fall in the scope of any particular career field, right? So you see up there all the examples of the institutional requirements. We call them IRs. These are great opportunities to get breadth, right? And so I kind of think about this as kind of like a pyramid, right? So if you think of yourself as a second lieutenant, you're at the base of the pyramid, and you've got a lot of flexibility in terms of what you can do. The longer you stay in, that it kind of goes like this, right? So there's less flexibility in terms of the types of jobs that your career field and the Air Force is going to be looking to you to fill. So you just got to make sure that you're within the right timeline. Timing is everything. I know you guys have heard that time and time again, but it really is. So if you're interested in being like an OTS commander, a ROTC commander, any of these kind of positions, you just need to understand when is the right time for you to do something like that, right? I would say CGOs are more capable of filling these type of positions. There are still FGO slots for some of these things, but it's just less of a chance that you'll get to do something like that at the FGO grade. And that falls back to Manning, right? Manning is not the greatest at the FGO level. You guys heard about the 100% promotion opportunity in Major, right? Why do you think we're doing that? Because FGO Manning is bad. You saw we had 2 promotion boards for Major this year. Why do you think we're doing that? FGO Manning is not great. So those are the types of things that corporately the Air Force are trying to do to get after that. But just understand in terms of the process and how the IR process works. So these requirements are fair shared across all the various career fields. How do we get to that fair share? So there's a calculator that happens. Some of the input into that is size of the career field. I was talking like the 6.2s get allocated a larger share of those requirements because they're bigger. Health of the career field. So not just the number of authorizations, but how many no-kidding officers do we have in the various year groups in that particular career field. Deployments play a factor into that as well. Career fields with a high ops tempo from a deployment perspective aren't charged with filling as many of these institutional requirements. So that's how the number gets to be what it is for every career field. And so then there's a process that the assignment teams down at AFPC are very linked into to be able to fill those positions. So you might see on a webinar, hey, if you're interested in being an ROTC commander, come and talk to us, or what have you. That's because the career field has a certain number of quotas that they need to fill. And this happens every assignment cycle, right? So again, the bottom line here is if you're interested in doing something like this, these are great opportunities to perform outside of your career field, to demonstrate that you can be an effective officer in something that's not your core AFSC. Talk to your assignment teams and just make sure you're good on the timelines. Questions? Yes.
You talked about this is really kind of in the CGO realm for possibilities.
Primarily, but not explicitly.
When in the CGO cycle, like, are we talking about like second or third assignment?
Yeah, so I would say probably second assignment, first lieutenant or captain. And that's another thing. So when does a second assignment happen? That varies by career field. Some career fields move you at the 4-year point, some move you at the 3-year point. But I would say for like an OTS instructor, first lieutenant can do that job, right? So, it just depends on the type of IR and then the battle rhythm in terms of when your assignment team looks to move you. Does that make sense?
Like the 4 to 6 year, or like beyond 6 years? Or
Yeah, I mean, you could be so I would say as you approach being a senior captain, it might not be ideal simply because you want to be, career fields will look at this kind of myopically and say, I want Captain Johnston to be in this type of job as he approaches his majors board, and that might not be an institutional requirement. It may be a core AFSC requirement. All right, and the thought behind that is, hey, we have demonstrated that if these are the jobs that people get promoted in as long as they perform. Bottom line, it's about performance wherever you're at. You heard bloom where you're planted. People say that for a reason. Our Air Force is very much about performance. Good. Okay. Anything else?
Sir, is it possible to avoid most of these jobs?
Is it possible to avoid them?
Yeah. I'm really interested.
How do I answer that? Yeah, sure, it's possible to. Yeah, you can avoid them. Why would you?
Well,
I guess
like
what's driving your question?
Being an OTS instructor, that just sounds miserable.
Okay. All right. So
I went to OTS.
yeah. So I will tell you that normally AFPC will seek volunteers for this type of job. So that's why I say if you're interested in something, you need to have that conversation with your assignment team. Sometimes they are forced into a non-vol situation, and so different assignment teams have a different philosophy in terms of how they go about non-voling people to these types of jobs. So is it possible to avoid it? Yes. They're going to look for volunteers. They're going to exhaust a volunteer list first before they non-vol someone. But again, these are must-fill requirements, and if the assignment team doesn't have any qualified volunteers, they will go the non-vol route, which could end up being you. In that case, no, you wouldn't be able to avoid it.
Okay.
Unless you made a decision on, do I want to take the assignment or move on with my life. So.
I mean, ideally from the 13S side, we want to keep people in their core at FSD, right? I mean, that just makes sense. But if we do have levied requirements on us, just remember though, if you go and pay that tax for a year or two, they're going to on-ramp you back into a mainstream 13S job to make sure, you know, like Major Cash is saying, to make sure that promotion board wise, whether it's school board wise, those type of things, you're competitive still from career field. So, and again, we have a lot of folks that are interested in getting to maybe be a OTS instructor because maybe there's some family needs in there. And you talk about bringing a family. Some people may want to get back to Maxwell. Some people want to go and be an instructor maybe at BMT so they can get closer to their family. It may not meet humanitarian qualifications, but you can get to San Antonio and be with your family for a year. So there's lots of reasons to do them. But as you fill ADPs, if you're interested, put that in there because we read every single one of them and we'll know if someone's interested to get to a specific location. So prior to getting taxed with these AFSCs, we'll know, hey, we got 3 people that want to go to San Antonio. Maybe we should focus on locations as opposed to jobs. So, but communicate with your assignment team. Make sure they know everything that's going on in your life, so they can make those decisions for you.
But like, for example, the RAS one is like, it's not like, not only I want to do, it's more like, it's very competitive, right? Like 3 slots per year.
So we get, we get a quota. We get a quota, and I believe it happens during the fall DT that they'll ask for applicants to compete. I'll tell you, my 3 years there, from 13 to 16, it was tough filling. There weren't a lot of applicants.
For real?
I would echo that too. So that surprised me.
And I will jump back to even the AFIT. We have like 8 requirements, and I never filled all of them. Never. And so, understand the timelines. A lot of it was understanding timelines. Oh, I missed this year, right? So always
have 30 people.
always be proactive. But I will say, when you do the AFIT, it is specific on degrees, right? So they're funding specific degrees. So don't think you can go in there and just get like management, right?
Yeah.
You're going to do space studies, you know, those type of focus. That way, they invest in you. And typically, those seats are funded by an organization, which we try to send you back to afterwards. So 533rd, NRO. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities to go Green Door, so National Reconnaissance Office. They all fund them, and we try to say, hey, you invested in this person. Now they're going to come back and, you know, grow your organization with what they learned. So if you're interested in these, please don't hesitate to apply because you think you won't be competitive. Apply because they may not even have enough.
Yeah.
Because like the minimum is like 7 years in being active. So
Yeah,
I was
7
just
and
gonna put
12
in,
is the one.
just so they get to know me for the first year, and then I'll probably be more competitive and apply the second one. But you said it's not. I mean,
I will echo those comments. I mean, RAS and PAS, from an FM perspective, we struggle to fill those as well. Part of it, I think, is the language requirements because you have to have a certain DLAB score. So if you understand what those requirements are and meet them and are interested in the program, that is a win-win. Because I think I can speak for most of the career fields that we typically struggle with that program on getting qualified folks, and then 2 interested in doing it.
And how many years you have in?
6.
So I would still call
Yeah.
because they may say, because we don't have enough, we would take you at 6.
All right, I'll call them.
So don't tell them I sent you. No, call them and engage. I'm interested in doing this, and they'll go across and talk to the people that own this process and say, is this something you would consider? Like if they're only going to get half their applicants, maybe they're willing to waive that requirement if you meet everything else.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it never hurts to ask. What's the worst they're going to say?
Yeah. Well, good. Thank you.
So is it possible to apply to multiple degrees at AFIT? Or do you have to pick?
I think you kind of go through a pecking order, and then like you can put multiple, and then the assignment team will look and say, hey, we have 20 for this one degree, some are going to have to move to the other one, and they'll have that discussion. But
That's why on that form, I think unless they change it,
You put
you
a
get to like
priority.
3 or 5. I can't remember which one, but yeah, it's not just one and done. You can, shoot for the world.
yeah, but my 3 years there, we never filled them. And I don't even think we filled half of them. We probably filled like 3 or 4 of 8. But some of it were requirements, timelines,
Yeah.
suspenses. Some people self-eliminated.
Yeah, and
They didn't do the
after
right paperwork.
Yeah, the requirements from a GRE, GMAT,
Right.
the testing scores, you have to have a certain score. And there's pretty stringent requirements from an academic eligibility perspective too.
And I think you have to have like a pre-approval, if I remember correctly, from like AFIT that you can
Yeah,
go there.
yeah.
There's
I
some
mean, that's-
vetting.
so they look
So-
at your undergrad stuff. They look
Yeah.
at.
So if you do that, you'll be competitive. If you don't do that, if the application's due and then you're like, why did you do the AFIT? Well, then these other people did, so sorry. So just take care of your own personal stuff, and I think you'll be very competitive.
Okay. Good discussion. Good questions. Anything else on the IR process?
So, one more thing.
Yeah.
It says allocated institutional requirements or must fills.
Yes.
Are these all allocated or only a portion?
So these are examples of the types of institutional requirements that are this is not all inclusive, right? So they are allocated out. So AFPC gathers up all of the requirements for all of the institutional requirements, and then they would call them like must fill and must fill. I never understood that, right? If it's must fill, it's must fill. But they would prioritize the institutional requirements because there are always more spaces than faces. So we never quite get to, and I'm not sure that we ever will be able to fill all institutional requirements. But there is a vetting process to look at what are the no kidding, I gotta have a body in this job, or it's gonna be catastrophic. And so those are the ones that no kidding get filled. So this is not all inclusive. That's just representative of some of the more common ones.
Do you understand like the language of must fill? Like, are y'all familiar with the SOAP, the Space Officer Allocation Plan? And terminology, like must fill jobs are ones that we intend to fill, and there's a bucket of what we call priority, which is the next tier down, and then the next priority down is entitlement, ones that we'll probably never get to just based on Manny. But if you go into the my purge and put in 13S and go to the 13S assignment page and just do SOAP, you can see, hey, what jobs are we focused on filling? A lot of it you'll see are ops, DO, commanders, but then you can see that next tier of staff, right? Joint, app space, those types of things. So I think it's important to do that because as you fill out ADPs, don't just put Belgium on all your locations, right? You got to be reasonable and understand what jobs are we looking to fill.
Yeah.
So.
So we'll go through a lot of that stuff here shortly. Yeah. All right. Anything else? IRs. Going once, going twice. So, all right. So let's talk about some specifics on the actual assignment system. So how do we, or how do the assignment teams know who to move, or how do they determine who to move? How do you end up getting PCS orders? So it's all is predicated on building the VML, the vulnerable to move list. So AFI 362110 outlines why we move people. And so the assignment teams each cycle will go and look at those must movers. You see some of the examples up there to rack and stack on how folks are eligible to move or not. So they're going to look at time on station. They're going to look at if you're overseas, when is your DROS? Does your DROS fall in that cycle, in a month of that cycle? Folks going into or coming out of Squadron Command or P&E are going to be must movers. And so I know for the finance career field, we went line by line, pulled the report and then went two humans looking line by line at every officer from 05, the most senior 05 to the most junior 01 to see if they fit into any of those categories to build the VML. So, CONUS to CONUS, you see up there 48 months for FGOs and captains. That is not a hard and fast thing. There are waivers for time on station, right? And so the amount of time that an assignment team would like to waive for an officer determines what the waiver authority is. So it can go all the way up to the AFPC commander, which is a 2-star. Generally in the finance career field, we move not only our lieutenants, but our captains as well at the 3-year point. And we do that for a reason. So there is flexibility to deviate from some of those timelines, but just know that there are waiver approvals that go along with that. Okay, so you see, I won't read all of those up there, but you see kind of the generic timelines. But if you've got a question on those, career fields do it differently, so I would encourage you again to reach out to your folks to understand from a just pure time on station perspective when you can at least look to potentially move.
On the 13S side, those clocks all start after you're qualified on a mission system, or?
Yeah, so we rely a lot on your code 55 that you guys have put in your, so if you look at your record, make sure your code is accurate, because we base it from 3 years from that date. But that's changed, that's a good question. It used to change 3 years from time on station. And then we got a lot of feedback from parents saying, well, it's taking them a year to get certified, so I only get them 2 years. And so we went and agreed on a code. So I think it's code 55 or 50. So we just need to understand that. But yes, 3 years from your code 55.
Okay. Here, perfect segue. So these are some of the gates that you need to understand for yourself and for your unit. Understand what you're responsible for after you pop on a VML to understand the process because you do have inputs into this process. So I'll just kind of walk you through this slide. First off, there are 3 assignment cycles, spring, summer, and fall, and you see the dates associated with those. There's been talk of moving to 2 assignment cycles, like a summer and a winter. Nothing imminent, but there has been some talk and discussions of going that route. So we just went on how to build a VML, so you see the timeline. So that's the first thing that'll happen is your assignment team will go through that exercise of building the initial VML, and then Joe Solano talked about the reclama window. So your commanders will have an opportunity to say, hey, you know, Cash is really working on something very important, or I got a plan to move him. He's going to be the wing exec, or maybe I'm sitting in a billet that is tied to a professional certification, and I need another year to get that certification, just experience. So any of those kind of reasons, they will have an opportunity to communicate that to the assignment team during that reclama window. The assignment team doesn't necessarily have to make a decision at that point. They could, but they take that into consideration. They'll then scrub it again and come up with a final VML, and that's like the no kidding notification, like, hey, you're probably going to move or could move, so start getting ready. And so after that final VML is posted, this next step is very important from the unit perspective. So submitting a requisition. That's basically communicating to AFPC, hey, you got Johnny on the VML, I need a backfill for Johnny. All right, and so that's important for a couple of reasons. I know FM is a small career field. So the assignment team would go, we would cross-check who we have on the VML and the requisitions that we would expect to accompany those folks on the VML. Some units don't do it for whatever reason. They forget, whatever. It's not a low priority. They think it's automatically just going to happen that they get a backfill. We would communicate to them, hey, we got Johnny on the VML, Commander. Are you plan on filling out a requisition? You need help with that? You understand that you need to do that? But not all career fields do that. Some of the larger ones, hey, like the loggies or some maintenance, it's like, hey, you didn't do your responsibility. Hey, we'll get to you if we get to you, right? So help your unit help themselves by making sure that they fill out a requisition. The other reason that's important is because the folks that are on the VML are going to see that requisition. So it's an opportunity for the unit to update any requisite information. Maybe the duty titles change. Maybe the rank, desired rank has changed. Maybe the qualifications or the job description has changed. So it gives them an opportunity to kind of refresh that data because the next step is the personnel requirements display visibility window. That's when all of the folks on the VML will get to see all of those requisitions, right? So to help inform their ADP. So you don't want to be, if I'm on the VML, I don't want to be looking at 10-year-old job description that is not representative of what I could potentially be doing in that job. So make sure that information, or have the unit make sure that they put eyes on that information to make sure nothing has changed and that everything is current. We talked about ADPs. It sounds like most of you guys know what ADPs are, but basically that's your opportunity to communicate why you want to do something with the assignment team. Why do you think you're ready to take on a particular type of job? You get to put in your type of job and locations, and we'll go through some more specificity on that. But that's basically what that is. This whole time, the assignment team will be communicating to you. Usually there are one or a series of webinars where everybody on the VML is invited to tune into that, and they'll go over these timelines. They'll go over the types of jobs that are available in the cycle, answer any questions that you may have specific to that cycle. And then after all that's done, all the ADPs come back, AFPC will start, your assignment team will start matching folks to assignments, and then you're off and running with getting orders and actually moving. So I think this is a good slide to kind of show cradle to grave what happens during that process and what your responsibilities are and what your unit's responsibilities are and what AFPC's responsibilities are in terms of getting you to that next job. Questions on any of that? Okay. All right, so Joe mentioned, we look at they look at every AEP. So with that, you want to make sure that one, it's professional, it's realistic, that it shows thought in your career advancement. We're going to look at what your boss says about you, right? So they have a narrative section that's in there that hopefully you use that as kind of a tool to have that mentor or feedback session with your boss or commander, whoever's filling out your reviewer section of your ADP, so that they understand kind of where you're going and are supportive of where you're going. We look and we tell folks, the reviewers, to be honest, to be truthful, to represent you and why they think you need to do something. So make sure you have that conversation and make sure they're on the same page, because what you don't necessarily want is to say, hey, I want to be a flight commander next, and your boss is saying, whatever you do, don't send them to flight command. So that just kind of looks bad. Okay, so we talked about records, making sure that stuff is accurate. No, kind of like the have you guys seen some do it like a pyramid, some do it like a left to right on, I've been in 3 to 5 years, these are the types of jobs I should be doing, et cetera, et cetera. Make sure you understand that. Make sure that that is aligned with where you're at and how your ADP looks. That's important. AFPC is going to look at, again, the timing. So as you approach a majors board, hey, what are those functional career jobs that, as a career field, we want you in, right? So look at some of that stuff, because if your ADP makes sense from that perspective, that just makes it a lot more easier and will increase the likelihood that AFPC can find a match for you that is appropriate in terms of that progression. Joe mentioned the prioritization plan, and I'll show an example of that. But every career field has a prioritization plan. So they're going to look at that first. So that's when we talk about mission needs. OPD, driven by commanders' inputs. Again, very important that you have a conversation with that reviewer to understand the implications of what you and that person are putting on the ADP. You see down there member preferences, and so it's on there because whenever AFPC can, you might find it hard to believe, but they do try to find win-win scenarios. So if there is a job in a particular location that makes sense from a professional development standpoint, from a mission needs standpoint, and you want to be there, and they have the flexibility to get you there, having worked there for 2 years, they work very hard to try to match all of those things up. Sometimes it doesn't happen, right? And so, the natural inclination is to be salty or feel some kind of way with AFPC. Please, resist that, because I promise you, they're trying to do the best they can, looking across the career field to find as many win-wins as possible. All right. So here's an example of a prioritization plan. This is FM's because it's the one that I have access to. So you kind of talked about those 3 tranches you see up there, critical, must fill. So as an FM community, hey, these are the jobs, got to have a body in, got to be vetted, critical, must fill, period, dot, done. Got to have somebody there. And then the priority, so we look across and we look and say, hey, we need to keep all of these filled to 85%. And this is an example. Everyone has a prioritization plan, but they don't all look the same. So you're not going to necessarily see that percentage. Some do it to where, hey, it's all, the criticals got to fill them all. And then we go and start to fill all, we got to fill all of the next priority. So we fill the criticals first, and then we fill the next tranche second, but they still all got to be filled, and then we go to entitlement. So it just kind of depends on the career field, but just know that, again, there are always more spaces than faces, and so every career field has to have a way or a method or a philosophy on how they go about filling those. Typically, these are governed by the development team, and so any changes are gonna to the prioritization plan are gonna come from the senior leaders of the career field. Questions? All right. So ADP, again, some of the things we kind of talked on some of this stuff, but just some stuff to be cognizant of, some do's and don'ts. So, be upfront. Again, look at the prioritization plan. One that's really important is use the AMS, the assignment management system, the requirements. Don't look at, if you go into AMS, you'll see requirements and you'll see authorizations, right? So don't use authorizations to fill out your ADP. Authorizations will show you all authorizations that a career field has. That is not representative of what the assignment team plans on filling in a given cycle. So make sure you use the requirements. Remember I talked about the personnel requirements display? That's what that is. When you go in AMS, they'll turn it on, and then you'll see the actual assignments that the assignment team plans on filling. Don't use authorization. All right. Any relevant issues, like, if you got an EF&P issue, if you got a joint spouse issue, if you've got anything that you want the assignment team to be aware of that is, not necessarily standard, or you just want them to make sure that they consider, that's a good way. The ADP is a good way to use that information. You see the don'ts on there. Just make sure you're not doing those things. The big one is the single location or job. Assignment teams don't like that. And here's an example of a good ADP. So again, I'm sorry, I'm an FM guy, so this is what I have. But the point is and this is, by the way, this is AFPC, this is the assignment team perspective. So it won't look like this when you fill out your ADP, but this is how it pops up on the other end. So you can see there that the individual has got 3 assignment types. So a flight commander, another flight commander in a different flight, and then a budget analyst. So it shows that they're taking into consideration all the different job types that are appropriate for their grade and experience, and then a varied location list, right? So they're putting, hey, here's the type of job that I want first, and then here are all the different locations. So I guess the point is, the more information you give AFPC to work on, the better. If you fill out fill out as much of the ADP as you can, there's more likelihood that the assignment team can find a win-win scenario based off of the information that you give them. So this is a bad ADP example. So I'm gonna pick on you 6'2". This is a 6'2", so I apologize. But this is okay. What does this show? Right? This shows that, hey, I just want to be in Florida. Whatever you do, send me to Florida. I really don't care about the job because I only filled out one job type, but I just want to be in Florida, right? So don't do that, because I'll tell you that from an AFPC assignment team perspective, they're going to say, they see right through that stuff. And if there's no extenuating circumstance to validate that, then they're going to say, okay, I'm going to fill the jobs where people have taken the time to demonstrate that they care about their development, and then this person will I'll get to them as I'll get to them. I'm being honest. Please don't do that, because it's very evident when folks do that, and it doesn't work out well for them. Yes?
So it's just kind of difficult for 13th year because there's a lot of breadth of depth out in Colorado.
Yep.
How do we avoid not having a Colorado syndrome at the same time, showing that?
Yeah, so that's something that's unique, right? So you want to address that, Joe?
We see that.
Yeah.
Okay.
We see that.
Yeah.
We do try to get folks, you're never going to get an answer on breadth or depth, right? We're not going to commit to that, but if we see that someone's been here like 12 years, right, we're going to look to potentially move them and leverage their experience. But at 12 years, you're moving into leadership, right? So, that's a long time. But we do have folks currently in this area. I don't know if they moved yet, but when I left, they were here for almost 15 years. And I see the Front Range, right, Buckley, here, back and forth. So you can do it. Technically, you can go from second lieutenant to 4-star and never leave Front Range. Right? There's schools here, there's development opportunities, but it's a struggle that's not just ours. The rating community has it as well. Certain aircraft are only at certain bases, right? And so they bounce around to 1 or 2 locations. So from a promotion board perspective, the homesteading thing, I wouldn't worry about that. As Air Force Space Command, as we go through this whole Joint Force Space Component transition now, and that moving from Vandenberg to here, that's only like trickling down on the Front Range as an opportunity. So don't worry about that much. We expect almost ADP, every ADP I look at has Colorado, and we understand that. And it'll be up to the team to look at the time to say what are our needs, and can we keep them there, or based on your expertise, we may need to somewhere else. So,
So you recommend going more than by positional, like styled stuff at that point?
I mean, for you guys, I mean, first 2 years, first 2 assignments are gonna be ops tours, right? And after your first 2 ops tours, you may sprinkle a depth command in there potentially. If not, then you're gonna look, after your first tours, major, you're gonna compete for DO, then school. After that, more staff. Now, what kind of staff? Joint, not joint, there's different flavors, right? After that, you're gonna transition into potentially, if you haven't done DO already, DO, and then command. Then command, then you're gonna be the same thing, right? Same thing as when you went to major. Are you gonna get to go to school? If not, are you competitive for 06 and go through those opportunities? Sprinkled in there may be some executive opportunities, right? CAGs, exec options. So that's kind of the general path that we'll have. But right now, focus on ops. And that's what you guys are going to do. You can focus on whether you want to stay in the white world or maybe try to get some breadth and get some green door opportunities. Because I will say that when you get to DO, you'll have opportunities to compete for both the white world and the green door. Is everyone tracking what I'm saying on the green door side? Okay, so like myself, I did 4 stops here. So I was the 50th from 2006 to 2010. Then I went to the NRO in New Mexico, did 3 years there. Then I did the AFPC thing for a little bit. Then I went to Leavenworth to go to CGSC, which is the Army's equivalent of ACSC, for a year. And I just came back here, back in the NRO at the NSDC. So I've got both sides. And I think that's a good opportunity for folks to get, because if you have both sides, when you meet DO boards, when you meet command boards, you have more options. Because typically Green Door only hires back Green Door. So folks that stay primarily white world may not have those opportunities. So just think about it. If you have questions, I am here afterwards. As I say, I'll give my email address or whatever you guys need if you need help shaping ADPs and stuff like that. But just think about that as you go through. But right now, focus on ops for most of the ranks that are in here.
Okay, so I got about 15 minutes. I want to talk a little bit about the development team. Everybody have you heard of the development team? Do you know kind of what that is? So basically it's composed of your career field senior leaders, both military and civilians. So like for FM, it's all of our MASCOM FMs that are typically either 06 or 1-star, and it's our various SESs, senior civilians that we have in the career field. So their responsibilities are to develop the career field. The development team, right? It sounds, simple, but that's what they do. So here are some of the things that they look at. They'll look at professional military education. They'll look at, again, the squadron commander and DO candidate process. They're responsible for coming up with those lists, and we'll kind of walk through how that process works. Any functionally specific key developmental positions, and then that officer vectoring that they're responsible for. That's as of, I think, about 3 years ago, half A1 put that into their responsibilities as well. All right, so professional military education. So for the younger folks, it's probably a ways off, but for like the captains, you'll start to come in these windows here pretty quick. So when we talk about professional military education, it used to be ASBC that lieutenants would go to. That no longer is around. So now for the lieutenants, your first professional military education will be Squadron Officer School. That is a different process than what I'm talking about here. Squadron Officer School is 100% throughput now. So between the 4-year and 7-year mark, and as long as you keep your nose clean, basically you'll go to SOS. This is different because it's a competitive process. So when we talk about IDE, think of Air Command and Staff College. When we talk about SDE, think of Air War College. But there are a multitude of programs that fall within the IDE and SDE range. So basically there's a nomination process that comes out. So you compete via what's called a 3849. It's similar to an ADP in the respect that you get to put your desired school locations and programs, really programs because the programs are tied to a location. But you get an opportunity to say, hey, here's the schools I want to go to and here's why. And then again, your senior rater, who is the nominating authority, will have the opportunity to vouch on that and say, hey, Johnny's my #1 of whatever. Here's why they need to go to, whatever school and why the Air Force will benefit on that. Do you have a question?
Yes, sir. So with the school selects off the majors board
Yep.
gone, are they just going to increase the percentages of nominations that senior raters have, or have they talked about releasing the new process in the near future?
Yeah, so they've got exactly right. So until it's unveiled, we kind of don't know. But what they have said is commanders will now have more authority in that process. And from the select perspective, they are talking about, they're going to grandfather in the current select, so it's not like they lose their select status and have to compete within that group. But how that functionally plays out in terms of the number of quotas that get allocated to the different career fields, yet to be seen. Yeah, but they're starting that in 18, so we'll see how it kind of rolls out. Okay, so that nomination comes up to AFPC. There's now a central PME board, so the DTs used to control who went to school. They don't necessarily control who goes now. They are responsible for the vectoring. But there's a board that looks similar to a promotion board that's a cross-functional makeup that they rack and stack all of the nominees for IDE and SDE, and they come out with, hey, DT, here are the number of folks and names of the folks that are going to go to school. And then the DT's responsibility is to vector them to the different schools. So the DT will have the board score, the DT will have where they want to go, and the DT will have discussions on why a certain officer they think they need to go to a particular school. So some of the things that they consider in that is where the person racked out. So if they're just barely above the cut line, it's probably unlikely that the DT would vector them to the most prestigious IDE or SDE program because they're probably not going to be competitive for that. Another reason, another consideration is any payback. And so, if I send the officer to a particular school, are there any associated paybacks with that graduating that program? So, do they have to go to a joint billet after they graduate the particular program? So those are some of the things they consider, and then they give that information, those vectors, back to the school's match board, which pretty much go along with what the DT recommends, unless there are discrepancies in terms of, hey, DT, you're vectoring somebody right above the cut line to a prestigious school that's only 5 people get into. Probably not going to do that, but most of the time they go along with what the DT recommends, and then they'll publish that after that's all wrapped up in a bow. 2 things that I mentioned: the process change back in 2015. So now we're going into we've got a couple of years under our belt with the new process. It used to be, hey, the DT took the nominations and they said who's going to school. They still vectored them, but hey, they determine who's going to go. They don't do that anymore. And then you see down there, the guidance now allows designees to actually decline going to school without prejudice. And the reason the Air Force is doing that is to kind of make sure that they're not unintentionally forcing people to make a decision about their career. So it's really a kind of a retention tool when you think about it, just giving officers more flexibility in terms of when it makes sense to go to school for that particular officer for their particular situation. Okay? Okay, so here's an example of Squadron Command Board, and then, Joe, you can jump in if finance doesn't have DO, so you can jump in if the DO process is a little bit different. But from Squadron Commander macro view, when you will be notified when your records are going to meet a Squadron Command Board, and the DT is going to be the one that racks and stacks your records against everybody else in your career field to determine who's going to be a Squadron Commander candidate. So you'll fill out a statement of intent. Again, there's a section on the ADP that talks about leadership opportunities, and that's where you fill out your statement of intent to say, hey, I really want to be a squadron commander. Here's why I want to be a squadron commander, you'll have the opportunity to do that. Please do that, because every year you'll have a couple of folks that are going to meet the DT, but they don't fill out a squadron commander statement of intent. And so it sends a negative message to the DT that, hey, this person is not all in because they didn't take the time to fill out their ADP. Again, you'll get to choose or get to highlight your desired locations and why and that whole deal. It's your way to communicate with the DT directly. Let me just pause for a moment and say, I know in my career field, you want to know who's on your DT. Right? And you want to have a relationship with at least one person on that DT because I remember I said records meet boards, you don't necessarily meet the boards, but I think there's value if a DT member can personally be familiar with you and be able to either advocate or discuss you amongst the folks that in the room that don't know you to say, hey, this person's really, better than their record. They've done X, Y, Z, whatever, however they do that. I think there's value in that to be able to just have those discussions to advocate for you in lack of anything that the record is telling you. So if you don't know who's on your DT, I would at least get the current list of who participates in it, and if you have a mentor or mentee relationship with an individual, maybe you work for a DT member, make sure you're having those discussions prior to meeting the DT. So again, they'll come up with the candidate list. In FM, the DT actually went to a straw man to try to figure out what officers they think fit best at the different locations. But there is a hiring process. So the DTs are not necessarily the hiring authorities. It's going to be wing commanders, right? So the list will come out, and then there's a process that happens that gets deconflicted across all the hiring authorities. That the MAGCOM plays a part in that as well. The MAGCOM functional to be able to deconflict the hiring process and which officers go to which locations. So that'll come out via a PSDM, and that's basically the process in a nutshell. So again, probably a little bit far off from that, but that's just so you have familiarity in terms of how it works. Questions there? Okay. All right, so I think that we're getting close to the end here. So officer developmental vectors, I said a few years ago, not necessarily that DTs weren't doing this, but half A1 just actually put it into the guidance as part of their responsibilities now. So DTs will vector officers at those 5 trigger points, so major and lieutenant colonel selects, and those coming out of professional military education and out of graduating squadron commanders. And so vectors, sometimes people confuse vectors with, hey, this is what I'm going to do. It's a tool, right? It represents possible assignments in the future. You're not necessarily locked into those, but the DT looks at, hey, here's what you've done, here's what you have done, here are some gaps, and so based on the gaps, we think it's logical for you to pursue a job, as a DO next or whatever it is next. So typically there are 3 vectors that you'll get. And you should get like a formal notification here, hey officer, here are your vectors. And so it should be 3 potential jobs. And so these are, again, not, hey, I'm going to do this first vector, then I'm going to do the second one, then I'm going to do the third one. It's a tool that represents the range of appropriate jobs for you as an officer, given where you're at in your career. Make sense? Yeah.
I will say one thing on this one. There are those main trigger points for us. 13S's are always different. Mm-hmm. We do a 5-year vector in addition to. So all the first lieutenant types here, when you put on captain, expect that November, December, that fall DT, you'll be vectored against your whole year group in the space community. So it doesn't go into your official record, but they leave there with a top third, middle third, bottom third as a forcing function that every DT member, in our case, it's all our wing commanders, so they do hire at the DT. But in this instance, they'll take that feedback and they're supposed to come down like Colonel Grant here and shove it down to the the group commander, all the associated attendant units, and have a one-on-one with you to say, hey, this is where you fell. You fell in the top third. You're doing what you should be doing. Make sure they keep you on that track. Second term, if you're in the second third, they're gonna say, hey, there's what we've seen. Here's what we can improve on. And the same thing from bottom third. I think it was a forcing function to let folks know where they're at. Right? It's all about feedback, tying it back to your mentorship, right? If you don't know how you're doing, then you don't know whether you need to correct it or not. And I think it's fair they give you that opportunity. So just remember that as you're going through. There is a 5-year vector, and it will be driven at the DT all the way down to give you feedback as a forcing function. So you have an opportunity prior to your major report to make any corrective actions if needed.
Good stuff. So I think we've got just a couple minutes, and any burning questions, discussion that you guys want to have right now? Yeah.
Do you have any insight into what the 100% promotion rate for major is going to do to the timeline for promotions? Is it still going to be the 150 days and that sort of thing? Or?
Yeah, I mean, good question. And so timeline, do you mean like in terms of when you come up for, like move into the left or right, when you actually meet the board?
Yeah, when are you going to meet the board?
Okay.
Are they going to, the pin-on rates projected to be different as far as line numbers and all that?
Yeah,
kind of stuff?
yeah. So I don't know about the line numbers, but what I will say is that this is just my opinion. This is what I think. We went to 2 majors boards this year, and the second one is happening next in December, right? So I think the new normal will be to have the promotion board, I think we'll go back to one, and then it'll be in December. That's what I think. So it could, you know, we'll see if that comes to fruition, but I think going forward, that is what will be the new normal.
So is there any concern with that 100% typical Air Force fashion of it swinging back the other way?
Yeah.
A lot of us are in that boat where we may be in that swing back the other way.
Yeah.
Are there
So
any projections
we
for that?
are a pendulum, right? I mean, that's a very good point. I know, was it maybe 2014 or something where we reached that, you know, not in all cases, but, you know, in some cases, those folks are the folks that we now need.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, sometimes we're driven by constraints that are out of our control, but yeah, I mean, that's anything in the Air Force. It always goes from one extreme to the other. So, you know, it's hard to predict, but certainly a possibility. Yeah.
So, little
Yeah.
old guy, but lieutenant, I would just make sure that you have that stuff kind of tightened up, because it might be competitive at that point for us.
Right, and it is strained, and when we first got the team, we're cutting people, and by the time I left the team, we're like giving bonuses out, trying to keep people in different AFSCs, so, yeah, it is hard to predict, but, we'll see. I mean, we probably will surge again, you know, at some point, depending how, you know, world events play out as well. That may be good, it may be bad. There's quotas as far as how many we can have active. There may be more serves, right? Or, you know, early retirements and those packages to figure out who are the heavy year groups. I know when we were there, they were cutting a lot of the folks there, maybe lieutenant colonels of like 23, 24, 25 years. That's where, at least in the 13th, we were very heavy.
So good point is to control what you can control, right? So we talked about master's degrees. We're talking anything that you can do to set yourself apart from your peer is a good thing, in my opinion. You want to just control what you can control, make yourself as competitive as possible in every scenario, so that, you know, if that pendulum does swing, you know, it's a very much tougher call for you as opposed to somebody that maybe hadn't done everything that they could do to make themselves competitive. Okay. All right, guys. So, you know, I'm downstairs in the comptroller squadron. I love talking about this stuff. If you got questions that are just, you know, generic or whatever about development, please, I'm available anytime. If you got questions later, Joe Solano said he need to pony up to answer some of the space-specific stuff. So you got some good resources here. So please take advantage of us if you need to. So thanks for coming again. Make sure, please, that you got signed in. Have a great rest of the day.